The Arizona sun had a way of pressing itself into your skin, not just with heat, but with weight, like it wanted to be remembered. I hadn't ridden an ATV in years, not since I was young and reckless, and yet here I was again, dust coating my legs, sweat slipping down my back beneath my tank top, clinging to a sense of control I wasn't sure I had anymore. He was behind me, my son, Nate, 22, strong, silent when he wanted to be, and far too intuitive for my comfort. The desert trail wound ahead of us like a secret, the kind that only unfolds under heat and tension. We had only one ATV, a rental mistake, maybe, and so we rode close. Too close. When he climbed on behind me that morning, arms slipping around my waist, I felt his breath near my ear, and something inside me flickered. Not in a way I could explain or name, just a sudden awareness of how grown he was, of how long it had been since I'd felt someone's arms around me at all. The engine growled beneath us as we rumbled across the sand-blown path, past cactus silhouettes and red rock formations that towered like ancient sentinels. My hair whipped in the wind, catching on his chest. He didn't seem to mind. "Mom," he said, voice low, near my ear to be heard over the motor. "You sure you remember how to drive this thing?" I smirked. I remembered just fine. "Trust me." He didn't answer at first.
Then, yeah.
Always. That word, always, landed deeper than it should have. We rode for miles in silence after that. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, just full of things not said. Things suspended between the way he leaned in closer on the turns and how tightly his fingers wrapped around my hips when the terrain got rough. Eventually, we stopped at a high point overlooking a dry riverbed, the horizon vast and shimmering. I turned off the engine, the sudden quiet almost startling. He didn't move, just stayed behind me, his chest still pressed against my back, his hands resting on my waist like they'd forgotten to let go. "You okay back there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He hesitated before answering.
Yeah.
"Just haven't done this in a long time." "Riding with your mom?"
No.
Letting go. I turned my head, trying to see him, but he was looking out at the horizon, jaw tense, something unreadable in his eyes. We sat like that for a while, two shadows against the heat, the engine ticking as it cooled beneath us, the silence around us growing heavier with every passing second. And that's when I felt it shift. Not something outside of us. Something between us. Something we weren't supposed to feel. I don't know how long we sat there, the world stretching out before us in waves of ochre and gold. The wind picked up, warm and dry, rustling the low shrubs around us like whispers too quiet to understand. But I understood something, even if I couldn't say it aloud. Eventually, I shifted in my seat, not to dislodge his grip, but to face him more fully. He leaned back just slightly, his hands loosening from my hips, his gaze flicking down to where our legs brushed. The contact had been accidental, at first. Now it felt like something else. "You know," I said, swallowing the dry knot forming in my throat, "when you were little, we used to take trips like this. You'd sit in front, not behind. You used to hold the handlebars so tight your knuckles turned white." A smile tugged at his mouth, slow and reluctant. "I remember. You always said, 'You've got to trust the land, Nate. Don't grip too hard or it'll throw you.'" I laughed softly. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you say." He said it without flinching, but his voice was lower now, intimate, almost reverent. My heart stuttered. I looked away, pretending to scan the horizon. The desert was merciless and wide, but suddenly it felt too small, too intimate, like it had become a container for something we shouldn't be touching. "You've changed," I said, more to the open air than to him. "You've grown into someone I'm still getting used to." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "You've changed too, Mom. You don't hide it as well as you used to." I turned to him, And the way he was looking at me, steady, open, searching, made it hard to breathe. Hide what? I asked, though I already knew. He shrugged, but the motion was stiff. That you're lonely. That you're still waiting for someone to see you. I wanted to deny it, but the truth was too raw, too exposed out here where the sun lit up everything. I let out a breath that trembled a little on the way out. I'm not waiting for anyone, I said. Those days are behind me. No, they're not. His voice had changed, deeper, more certain. You still want to be seen. Not as a mother. Not just as her. You want someone to notice what's underneath all of that. He reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek with the back of his hand. The gesture was simple, innocent even, and yet it landed in my chest like thunder. I froze. Time slowed. Every memory I had of him, as a toddler, a teenager, now a man, flickered through my mind like lightning behind my eyes. But this moment didn't belong in any of those categories. Because this was the first time he touched me like I was something more than safety. More than history. More than mother. I turned my face slightly into his hand, not knowing why. Maybe because I needed the contact. Maybe because I was too tired of pretending I didn't crave the kind of closeness that made your skin remember it for days after. His fingers hesitated there, and I could feel the tremble in them. He wasn't as sure as he sounded. He was holding back, waiting for me to tell him to stop. But I didn't. Not yet. What are we doing, Nate? I whispered, barely able to hear myself. I don't know, he murmured. I just know I haven't felt this right in a long time. My eyes burned suddenly, not with guilt, but with fear. Of crossing a line. Of not crossing it. Of finally letting myself be seen the way I had hidden from for years. The wind kicked up again, blowing his hair back from his forehead, and I reached out without thinking, brushing it aside the way I used to when he was a boy. But he wasn't a boy now, and neither of us was pretending otherwise. We stayed like that, faces inches apart, breath mingling in the sun-warmed air. The ATV beneath us was still warm, humming softly in its rest, as if it too were holding its breath. And I realized in that moment, something had already changed. Not in him, not in me, but between us. Something had started. Quietly, unspoken, but irrevocably. When I finally turned away from him, the moment didn't dissolve. She just followed us, quiet and steady, like the sun hanging over us. I started the engine again, but I felt his hands on my waist in a different way, not just for balance, but something conscious. We drove back to the dry shallows, the wheels kicking up a cloud of dust behind us. The trail pushed the ATV, and after a sharp drop, a jolt of tension shot through my neck and shoulder. I flinched. Just a little, but he felt it. Are you okay? His voice was at my ear again, warm, grounded. I'm okay, I said, even though it wasn't. I just haven't ridden in a while. When we reached a small clearing in the shade of a low mesquite tree, I stopped the ATV. The engine ticked, cooling down, and the cicadas hummed loudly in the branches above us. I hunched my shoulders, trying to untie the knot that had formed right under my neck. Nate was the first to jump off the ATV, and as I started to move, he reached out, supporting me with one hand on my waist. The touch was gentle, familiar, and unfamiliar at the same time. You're holding the tension, he said quietly, looking at my shoulder. Right here. I tried to joke back. Is it obvious? He nodded, and a slight smile spread across his face, but there was something serious behind it. Sit, he said, pointing to a low, flat rock nearby. Let me help. Nate, I don't. Mom. His tone was soft, not pushy, just confident. You're hurting. Just let me. Something inside me relaxed, maybe the pain, maybe something deeper, and I sat down on the rock. The rock was warm beneath me, sun-drenched and smooth. I pushed my hair aside, exposing the back of my head, not thinking too much. He stepped behind me. His hands hovered for a moment before touching me. And when they did, I almost sighed in relief. It was a romantic touch. It wasn't careless. He was firm, focused, careful. His thumbs pressed gently against the muscles at the base of my neck, warm and slow. The desert wind carried the scent of sagebrush around us, the heat of the day settling like a blanket. His fingers traced lines of tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for months, perhaps years. "You always take care of everyone else," he murmured, his voice soft but firm. "But no one takes care of you." I closed my eyes. The pressure increased, enough to ease the pain, and I felt something move beneath his hands, not just in my muscles but inside me. It was as if a door had opened. I didn't speak. I didn't trust my own voice. He worked silently, slowly, and patiently, as if he had all the time in the world. The cicadas were buzzing. A hawk was screaming overhead. The world seemed incredibly distant. After a long pause, he spoke again, quietly, almost thoughtfully. "I used to think that strength meant not needing anyone," he said. "But I look at you, and you're the strongest person I know, and you still suffer alone." My breath caught in my throat, not from pain, but from recognition. He didn't talk about my neck anymore. I opened my eyes, staring out at the vast red desert, its horizon shimmering with heat. "I didn't want to be a burden," I whispered. His hands froze, but they stayed. "You can never be a burden to me," he said. The words settled between us like dust falling back to the ground. Slowly, he pulled his hands away, though they lingered a moment longer than they should, long enough for my skin to remember the warmth. When I turned around, he was already sitting next to me, close enough for our shoulders to touch. No one rushed forward.
No one moved away.
Now the silence was like a held breath, shared, frozen, and alive. Something had changed, and we both knew it. The Arizona sun had retreated behind the ridge, casting long amber shadows over the clearing. The air still held its heat, but under the shade of the tall cottonwood tree, there was a stillness, a hush, like the land itself was holding its breath. We had hiked in silence for the last hour, letting the crunch of our boots and the occasional chirp of distant birds fill the space between us. I wasn't sure what I was looking for when I suggested we come here. Maybe an escape, maybe a moment, or maybe just a reason to stop pretending I didn't feel the way I did. He stood a few feet from me now, eyes scanning the distant mountains, arms crossed as if holding something in. The light caught on his jawline, now more defined than it had been just a year ago. That same jaw I used to kiss goodnight when he was a boy, now a man with a voice that rumbled low and thoughtful. "I'm glad we came out here," he said finally, his voice quiet, reverent. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Me too." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was charged, like the hush before a storm. I could feel it in the way my skin tingled, in the way my chest felt too tight. He turned to me slowly, his expression unreadable. "You've been different lately." I looked up sharply. "Different how?" He hesitated, like you're trying to hide something. But I see it anyway. The words lodged in my throat. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was the same as always. But he wasn't wrong. And we both knew it. He took a step closer, the dry leaves crunching beneath his boots. "I can't keep pretending either." That stopped me. My eyes flicked to his, warm, earnest, aching. And something inside me gave way. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His breath hitched. "Since last spring, when we started taking those walks after dinner. You'd laugh at my jokes, but it was more than that. I'd catch you watching me when you thought I wasn't looking, and I'd do the same." My lips parted, but no words came. He stepped closer. "It scared me," he continued, "because I didn't know if I was losing my mind or if you felt it too." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of everything I'd buried surge up like a tide. You weren't imagining it. His shoulders softened with relief. The space between us had vanished without me realizing. He was close now, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the steadiness of his breath. "Say something," he murmured. I did the only thing I could. I reached for his face, slowly, gently, my fingertips brushing the edge of his jaw. He leaned into it, eyes fluttering closed for just a second, and when he opened them again, they burned with something raw and deep and unspoken. "I've tried so hard not to feel this," I confessed. "Told myself it was wrong, that I was supposed to protect you from feelings like this." He shook his head, voice rough. "You've never made me feel safer than when I realized I wasn't alone in this." Then he kissed me. It wasn't hurried or clumsy. It was slow, aching, like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in silence. My hand slid around the back of his neck, and I felt him shiver as our lips moved together, tentative at first, then deeper, hungrier, as if years of restraint had finally unraveled. The breeze whispered through the trees, but I barely heard it. The world narrowed to the warmth of his mouth, the firmness of his body pressed against mine, the soft gasp that escaped me when his hand found the curve of my back. I didn't know what this meant, or what tomorrow would bring. But under that tree, in the stillness of the Arizona dusk, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We were no longer pretending. His name fell softly from my lips in the hush between kisses. "Nate." He stilled at the sound of it, our foreheads touching, his breath brushing against my cheek. "I've waited so long to hear you say my name like that," he whispered, his voice raw. The ground beneath us was warm, the kind of warmth that lingered after a long day of sun. Nate reached for my hands, held them between his, thumbs brushing slowly over my skin. His eyes were locked on mine, searching, steady. "I know this is complicated," he said, finally, "but I don't care." I let out a shaky breath, glancing down at our joined hands. "I care. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back." He didn't flinch. "I don't want to go back." There was something about the way he said it, without hesitation, without apology, that made my heart twist. How many times had I second-guessed every look, every moment too long in his presence? How many nights had I stared at the ceiling, telling myself to forget how it felt to laugh with him, to be seen by him, to feel the energy shift when our arms brushed. And now he was here, with no walls between us. Nate sat down at the base of the tree and gently pulled me down beside him. The bark pressed against my back as he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising tenderness. His fingers lingered, tracing the line of my jaw. "I used to think I was imagining it," he said, eyes distant. "How my chest would tighten just sitting near you. How I'd catch myself watching you in the kitchen, wishing I was someone else, someone who could touch you without it being wrong." A lump formed in my throat. "You're not someone else," I whispered. "You're you. And maybe that's what scares me most." He leaned in, his voice barely audible now. "Does it still scare you?" I hesitated. Yes and no. Nate's lips brushed against my temple, slow and reverent, like he was still asking permission. I turned toward him, kissed him again, this time not like a mistake, but like a promise. His hands cupped my face, grounding me in the moment, in the impossibility of it all. But it didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt real, tangible, like something we had both carried in silence for so long had finally taken shape between us. The sun had dropped lower now, the clearing bathed in rose gold and softening shadows. A warm breeze rustled through the leaves above, and I let myself lean into him, his arm winding protectively around my back. We didn't speak for a while. We didn't need to. But when I rested my head against his shoulder and he kissed the top of my hair, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of judgment. Not of the past. Not even of what might come next. Because Nate wasn't just some fleeting fantasy. He was here. With me. And whatever this was between us, it was no longer just a feeling we had to hide.